Amazon's all for recreational marijuana. Coachella is back, and a wild night in the NBA. Damian Lillard is on fire. Wednesday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Wednesday, June 2nd. I am Jill Wagner with Baker Machado, who is once again in for Carlo. Hey, Baker.
Hi, Jill. Good to see you. Good to be back here once again. By the way, we finally got our first look yesterday at the company of baby Francesca, Carlo's little one. Super cute. I think, though, looks a little like Carlo.
I think looks a lot like Carlo, actually.
I mean, and I feel bad for our poor listeners because Carlo is abysmal and terrible when it comes to social media, so nobody obviously has seen the photo besides all of us here at Cheddar. But just imagine a photo of Carlo with a nice baby bonnet on top of it. That is baby Francesca.
And we hope that baby Becky and Carlo are all doing well. Baker, let's get to some news here. A really big milestone. New York City reporting 0 new COVID deaths on Tuesday for the first time in months. That is a huge milestone for the one-time epicenter of the pandemic in the United States. More than 57% of New Yorkers are fully vaccinated. Rates, though, for vaccinations have started to plateau in the past few weeks. President Biden will be holding a news conference at 1:15 this afternoon. He's going to be talking about the nation's COVID response. His goal is to have 70% of U.S. adults receive at least one COVID-19 shot by July 4th. So far, 12 states have actually passed that benchmark. That includes Vermont, Maine, and Massachusetts. On the lower end of the scale, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia.
Yeah, the South really struggling here when it comes to their vaccination rates, Jill. And let's talk about these incentives here, because basically all the people that wanted to get the vaccine got it super early. So now you're essentially just trying to get that last 20% of people to get to that herd immunity level. And so this is why you see almost every state out there encouraging people with some sort of freebie or discount. We talked yesterday about Krispy Kreme saying that they've already given out 1.5 million free donuts so far through their COVID-19 promotion, which of course fully vaccinated people can get a free donut every day for the rest of the year, which is good for all of us out there. But other states, even my state in Colorado, now doing a lottery as well. We saw how successful that was in Ohio, California doing their own incentives. Here in New York, you can get free tickets to a Yankees game if you get vaccinated, Jill. So all of this and added incentives. That way we can finally get to that herd immunity level.
Also in COVID news, COVID variants are soon going to be named after letters in the Greek alphabet and in order of their detection instead of the place where they were first discovered. The World Health Organization says that referring to a variant by the country or the location where it was first found can create a stigma around that location and perhaps deter a local government from actually reporting about it. I think this makes a ton of sense, Baker. By the way, the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, that's what we refer to it as.
Right.
Most scientists think that it did not originate in Spain. So Spain has been just getting this bad rap for the Spanish flu for a long time.
Absolutely, Jill. You're so right. And by the way, look at all the variants that we've had so far with COVID. The UK variant, the Brazil variant, the South African variant. Do you look at those countries differently because the association of those variants? So I love that they've changed all this. And by the way, Canada, Jill, has now approved a vaccine change in between your first and your second doses. Now, the country says that anybody who received the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine can now get either the Pfizer or Moderna as their second dose. The advisory affects more than about 2 million Canadians, and this comes amid concerns over those rare blood clots that are popping up in the country that potentially are linked to that AstraZeneca vaccine. I'm actually surprised, Jill, that we also haven't seen more people say, look, even if you got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, that one-dose vaccine, if you want just the added benefits and the added protection, get the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine, that one dose down the road as well. And there has even been some research. They haven't been able to fully look into all of it to see if it's really beneficial or not, but they're already looking into research to say that, let's just say maybe you got Pfizer one dose and Moderna the second dose. Are those both also still just as effective for you?
Some quick retail news. Walmart extending its in-store hours that were cut because of the pandemic. So stores are now going to be open from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. starting Saturday. And Alamo Drafthouse is emerging from the shadow of bankruptcy. That chain also planning to open up 5 new theaters in the fall. Baker, we've talked a lot about just the movie theater industry and of course, taking such a big hit over the pandemic, and also how the going to a theater, that experience hasn't changed much in the past few years, except at Alamo Drafthouse, which did try to reinvent the game a little bit by offering really good food and making it more of an experience. I love Alamo Drafthouse, so I'm rooting for them here.
Jill, every analyst I've talked to when it comes to the future of movie theaters has said if movie theaters want to survive what has happened during the pandemic, with the fact that every film now is available on streaming, you have to give people an added incentive and experience of enjoying the film rather than being safe and at their home, especially given the fact that HBO Max and Disney Plus have put almost every single film that is also debuting in theaters on their streaming platform. And when you had Alamo Drafthouse filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy during the pandemic, this got a lot of people worried about what the future of movie theaters would be. Would there even be a movie theater? My favorite movie theater chain in California was the ArcLight. They had the Pacific theaters as well, which was at the Grove. They filed for bankruptcy also. So this also gives you hope, Jill, that if Alamo Drafthouse could open up 5 new locations, one of them here in Manhattan, this would be huge news for all those other movie theater chains not named AMC who are trying to survive here.
Right. Also, Coachella's back, right?
Yes. Oh my God, Jill, this is such great news, especially for those who have gone to Coachella a bajillion times like me. Coachella returning next year for its 2 weekends starting in April 2022. Now, the lineup, Jill, has not been released yet. It is expected, though, to bring together some of the biggest names in music. Advance passes are going on sale Friday. It's all expectations there. It's going to sell out within a few seconds. Its sister country music festival, Stagecoach, it also announcing today it is going to return next year as well. Both of those festivals were canceled the last 2 years because of the pandemic. They had tried multiple times, Jill, to maybe get the festival with either limited capacity. Later on, there was talk maybe they could see Coachella in October of last year, and then because the pandemic never really subsided and the coronavirus restrictions were just still too intense in California, that they were still unable to get it done. So this is amazing news, Jill. I have been to Coachella 3 times, Jill. In my previous job, Jill, I had the greatest job. I had to cover a lot of Hollywood events and parties, and one of my assignments was always covering the parties at Coachella, which you would get like Katy Perry and Ariana Grande and the Red Hot Chili Peppers and all this stuff there. Coachella is an amazing experience, but now at 36, Jill, I am way too old to do Coachella now.
Weren't you saying you were dying to go to Burning Man?
Yes, and by the way, that is still on the bucket list to do. I probably have to go to the gym first for a little bit, Jill. It is on something I'm going to get done sometime in my life, but now I'm just way too old. I go to bed at 8 o'clock, Jill. When I was at Coachella, they still have bands performing at like 11:30 at night. So this is, much different.
Oh my gosh, when I have friends who say, when talk about making plans and they're like, oh, should I make an 8:30 reservation? I'm like, not unless it's 8:30 in the morning.
It's so funny you say that. So here, I mean, obviously in the suburbs too, but in Manhattan, everybody's like doing dinner plans now, doing drink plans. I had a friend that is in town next week, and she's like, hey, let's get dinner. I can get us a table at like 8:45. And I was like, how about earlier? How about maybe like 5 or 6? And she's like, sorry, I'm still working at that time. And I was like, oh my God, the juxtaposition of what my life is like versus others. 5 or 6, Jill, that is like a 10 o'clock dinner for me now.
I love an early bird dinner.
Oh, me too. And by the way, drinks are always cheaper at that time, so I even love it more at that.
Okay, Florida becoming the latest state to ban transgender women and girls from participating in female sports. Governor Ron DeSantis enacting that law on the first day of Pride Month. The Florida bill, like others that have been passed in Republican-controlled states, has been criticized as unnecessary and discriminatory toward an already vulnerable population, transgender youth. And it comes as President Biden calling on Congress to pass the Equality Act to protect the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, Jill, Florida now the 8th state to enact a trans sports ban. They joined most of the states in the South. Yesterday, by the way, as this was happening, I was interviewing Human Rights Campaign President Alfonso David as this was happening, and he told me live on air yesterday that they are filing a lawsuit against the state of Florida and Ron DeSantis for this. And as you mentioned, Jill, Ron DeSantis did this on the very first day of Pride, just days away from the anniversary of the Pulse shooting that happened in Orlando. Jill, it is so sad. It breaks my heart how much the trans community has been attacked by local legislatures out there. Look, trans youth, the suicide rates for trans youth is so incredibly high, Jill. I saw one survey out there that said 40% of trans youth have at least at one point seriously considered suicide at one point in their life. Less than 30% of trans youth say their families are supportive of them. 8% of them say they can't even find a place that will take them in if they've been basically taken out of their house and they have no other place to live. And Black trans female students are 5 times, Jill, more likely to be murdered than their white peers, Jill. So when I see so many of these stories, and we should note, Jill, the amount of teenagers that are involved in women's sports that are trans youth are an incredibly small number. And the trans community is a small community as it is, so you have to think the trans youth is even smaller, Jill. It gives me... It makes me almost irate that these Republican governors somehow are thinking that some boys think that this is going to be an advantage for them in high school sports. And they're like, all right, I'm just going to, switch genders and I'm going to go play sports for the female side because it makes it easier. That's not happening, Jill. This is not like this epidemic that is happening. And as a result, you are seriously impacting the mental health of so many trans youth in this country as a result of that.
Look, we mentioned that it's Pride Month, and you and I have talked a lot, not only on camera, but off camera as well, about how quickly things have changed for the better when it comes to the gay community. Not only acceptance, but really embracing the gay community. But does it feel like with something like this, it's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back?
Jill, absolutely. We say all the time about how fast things have changed and how fast people have accepted the gay community. Jill, it wasn't always like that. I mean, in 2004, Jill, the presidential election between John Kerry and George W. Bush was a hugely transformative moment in my life because I was a 19-year-old boy at the time, obviously a gay boy, hadn't come out of the closet just yet. And this was when we saw Republicans in particular using gay marriage as a cudgel in the culture war. And this was driving families apart. I had a lot of families who were not supportive of my family that were not supportive of gay marriage during all this. You had families basically being divided by this. And as a result of that, me and numerous of my friends delayed our coming out because of that. I would have come out earlier, Jill, in my life. Listen, I was dancing and singing to Cher and Madonna when I was 2 years old. But I would have come out earlier in my life if society at the time didn't use my rights as sort of this wedge issue when it doesn't impact so many people. And as a result, again, it delayed my coming out, and I didn't come out until my early 20s as a result of that. And so when these trans youth and these trans bans are happening, I can't help but think, Jill, how many kids out there might have revealed more about their identity but didn't do it because they were so scared about how society would look at them.
Thank you for sharing that perspective, Baker, because we don't get that perspective so much on the podcast. And I think that it helps when we talk about these issues and we really talk about them in a political sense.
It normalizes
That's not the story.
Right,
the story are the actual people who are being impacted by this. And to your point, these policies made a difference in your life for the worse.
Absolutely,
I mean, that's your mental health, to not be able to be honest about who you are to your family and your friends. I can imagine just how devastating that is.
Jill, it absolutely was, because then it makes you second guess who you are, your whole identity, about why you're even here on this planet as a result. And by the way, the issues that we go through as gay people, gays and lesbians, is significant. But what you go through as a trans person, Jill, is even more extraordinary because you are evaluating so much more about your identity. So I can only imagine what they're going through a situation like this, Jill. And again, it proved Republicans were able to win the White House based on gay marriage as a big issue, but we did see just a few years later this transformative sea change that happened, where then all of a sudden you had the marriage equality case go to the Supreme Court, and that as a result was a transformational change. People then started to realize my marriage didn't affect their marriage, and the sky didn't end up falling as a result of that.
Right.
Just like people are going to see down the road that these trans sports bans are abhorrent, and the sky did not fall when they basically did not go after trans people.
All right, let's switch gears. Amazon backing a federal bill to legalize marijuana. In a blog post, the company expressing support for legislation introduced in the House last month that would legalize marijuana at the federal level. Amazon will also no longer include marijuana in its pre-employment drug tests, except for those subject to regulation by the Transportation Department. And in other news, Amazon also says it's changing its controversial policy that measures worker productivity. It's known as time off task. That is a policy basically that tracked workers' movements anytime they were on duty. And it was one of the reasons given for why workers wanted to unionize.
Jill, this is significant for many reasons. One, Amazon, by the way, also came out supporting of Joe Biden's infrastructure proposal as well. I think they're doing that, obviously, for the regulation aspect and all of this and be favorable to Washington. But this is huge because Amazon, one of the largest employers in the entire country. And Jill, we forget, with all of these states that are legalizing cannabis state by state, there is still no federal protection for you whatsoever, and so many people are failing their drug tests, even in states that the policies are legal. Like, Jill, here in New York State, it is legal for you to smoke weed, but yet you could still fail a drug test and still not be able to get a job at the same time. So there's obviously has to be some sort of huge change in this. Amazon also, and I think they're also taking a page of Uber from this. Dara Khosrowshahi, the CEO of Uber, has already said that Uber is going to deliver cannabis whenever it is federally legalized for them to be able to do that.
Interesting.
So I think Amazon's also doing this because I feel like Amazon is going to find some way, maybe down the road, to deliver your weed in addition to your Echo and all of the other toilet paper that you're buying from Prime.
Very interesting. Also in some Amazon competition, DoorDash and Uber Eats looking to basically one-up Amazon, focusing on this next hour commerce. So for consumers, that means getting everything from food to pharmacy items within an hour after ordering. The head of Uber Technology saying Amazon powers next day delivery. We're going to power next hour commerce.
Yeah, Jill, this makes a ton of sense. Do you have to diversify to other areas besides just restaurant deliveries? So you're talking pharmacy deliveries, coffee deliveries, everything else. Uber essentially wants to also be like Amazon, where it's the last mile of everything is being completed by them.
Okay, if you went to bed early last night, you may have missed one of the greatest NBA playoff performances of all time. The Portland Trailblazers' Damian Lillard was in the zone, to say the least. He scored 55 points and he hit 12 three-pointers, which is the most ever in a playoff game. He beat the record of 11 that was set by the Warriors' Klay Thompson back in 2016. Despite his efforts, though, the Blazers lost to the Denver Nuggets in double overtime. So they are now down 3-2 in this best-of-7 series. Baker, for anyone who's listening and is not familiar, you are, of course, a huge Nuggets fan from Colorado.
Yes, Jill. So a huge sigh of relief for me, Jill, that I woke up early this morning to find out what happened in the game last night, because this game, by the way, didn't start till like 10 o'clock at night last night. So obviously no chance I'm going to be able to watch it. And yes, amazing that the Nuggets were able to prevail because they've been really bad in a few of the games against Portland. And Damian Lillard is just OOC. He is out of control, Jill. He has been so good this whole series. He was amazing in the playoffs for the Blazers last year. Jill, the whole playoffs this year have been so amazing. And one other thing I would note here is the Brooklyn Nets won yesterday. They beat the Boston Celtics. They won their series 3-1, yet nobody in New York is talking about the Nets. Yeah, I literally cannot find a single person in the street that wants to talk about the Nets. Everybody wants to talk about the Knicks, and the Knicks, by the way, potentially, if they lose tonight, are out of the playoffs. So it's just this incredible sort of, look at what is important here in New York City.
The Knicks haven't been good for so long, and
No.
they are, when you think New York sports, you do think the Knicks, for better or worse.
Jill, I do have to say, though, as a sports fan, people have always said to me, if there's an important game at Madison Square Garden, it is the most electric, amazing place you'll ever be, ever. And so seeing some of these playoff games with Madison Square Garden basically filled to the brim with fans, people are so obsessed with the Knicks here, that is special. The NBA is at its best when teams like the Knicks are good. Unfortunately, the Knicks haven't been good, as you mentioned, since 2013 when they last made the playoffs. But Jill, the whole playoff season has been amazing so far. I'm just loving every one of the games, and I just really hope my Nuggets win the whole thing.
Okay, well, that is it for today's podcast, Baker. And unfortunately, that's it for you this week because you're going on vacation.
Yes.
So I am left. You've abandoned me. Carlo's abandoned me. I'll figure this podcast out tomorrow and Friday.
So look, I am available at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Will I be mentally there? I don't know. I'll likely be at a pool with a cocktail. But listen, if you need to phone a friend for just a few random jokes, if you're by yourself tomorrow, give me a ring.
Okay, Baker, I might take you up on it. And that is what you need to know for Wednesday, June 2nd.